Hey gifted crafters, welcome back for another Saturday CrafterNoon. Thank you all for tuning in today. I see we've got a lot of people from a lot of different places all over, from Maryland, Minnesota, South Dakota, California, Oklahoma City. Thank you all for joining and tuning in. If you're tuning in for the first time, my name is Nancy with GiftsHQ, and I host these weekly live sessions so we can talk about all things crafty. And we talk about everything that ranges from knitting, crocheting, embroidery, sewing, and so much more. So if this is something that you're into, you're definitely in the right place. So drop into the chat, say hello to a couple of friends that you see out there, and let's share some tips, tricks, and ideas so that we can create a nice little community where we share all kinds of ideas and we can just learn together. So I hope that you really enjoy what I have planned out for you today. Before we go into anything, let's just say hello to a couple of friends I see out there. I see Amy Bullis, I see Crafting with Robin, Donna Phillips, Jackie Hallman, Judy Bauer, Norma Lassero, 1 Minute Tips. I see Quilting Brownie, I see Rita Edge, I see Robin's Quilt Basket, and I see Sassy. And thank you all. I hope I didn't miss anyone. If I did, I will keep checking the chat and just, try to go ahead and ask me questions, or if you have anything that you want me to point out, let me know. I'll be checking the chat and just tuning in as I go. So again, thank you all for joining. And if you know me and tuned into some of my other lives, you know that I love my holidays. So let's jump into the list of holidays that we have. So today is National Umbrella Day, if you didn't know that. And I think that someone mentioned it's a little bit rainy out there, so you could definitely use that. It is also National Chinese New Year. And of course, what everyone knows is that this is Super Bowl weekend. So I'm sure there's a lot of things going on out there. All of you Super Bowl fans just getting ready. Maybe you made the little table runner that we did. I know I have mine all laid out and ready to go. Everyone's just kind of preparing, getting everything ready for the Super Bowl. So whether you are a 49ers fan or maybe you are with the Chiefs, it's really anyone's game, right? Is it really Taylor Swift versus the 49ers? I don't know. This has just gotten a little bit ridiculous, but hey, just go with it. Have some fun. It's just a good time, and it's a great opportunity to share sometimes with family and friends. So if you tuned in with us last week, we covered making some Valentine's Day cards with fabric, and that was live number 76. Today is live number 77. So we're going to be tackling a whole different project that can be Valentine related, but you can also change it up. It doesn't matter what fabric you use. You can do any holiday with this. And I think it's a quick and easy project that anyone can do. And I'm going to show you some quick little hacks that will make it almost foolproof. So I hope you guys really enjoy that today. Okay, let's see. I see we have some football fans that are out there. Amy says that she's all about football here. They don't allow anyone in the house unless they're all about football too. No other discussions allowed, but we'll probably make an exception for Taylor. Awesome, baby. That's great. So it's a lot of fun, and it's a great opportunity again to get family and friends together, and everyone just kind of sits around and has a great time. And with the little table runner that we've made a couple weeks ago for Super Bowl, you can also kind of bring that into the mix and get people to kind of play along with the table runner and, maybe kind of anticipate what the next plays are. So that's always a lot of fun to do. Okay, so what are we doing today? Well, today I thought that I would show you how to make a block. And it is called the Disappearing 9 block. It's a really simple block to do. So very, very easy for beginners. And I'm going to show you a really quick hack on how you can make this block that will come out probably 90% of the time. So let's get right to it because we got a lot to cover. And I want to make sure that I am able to do this within the hour. So first off, you're going to need some fabrics. Now you can go ahead and grab a fat quarter if that's what you have, or if you just have some scrap fabrics like I do here, you can go ahead and grab some of those. It's going to be really, really simple. You're not going to need too much. And if you really like the way this comes out, you can actually make a couple of these and make it into a nice little quilt. Maybe you can make a little lap blanket. Maybe you can make a little baby blanket with it. There's so many things it can do. You can add a fun little border to it, and it's just, you know, it's amazing. Amazing what you can do. Now, I'm going to show you just the block. So if you want to make more of these and make several blocks and then sew them all together, you'll just also need the backing fabric to go along with it. I kind of use the quilt as you go kind of method, so the batting is also going to be incorporated. So that's just some of the items that you're going to need. So besides, maybe if you're going to use the fat quarter, or if you're just going to use some scrap fabric, just go ahead and grab some of that. And you're going to want to also have some cotton batting. That's just the one that I like to use. And let me just grab some of that. So these are just some scraps that I have left over. You can see I've got some red and I've got some pink fabrics on here. So that's the two that I'm going to be using. And then I have a cotton batting that I'm going to use here. And I'm just making one block, so obviously you're going to need a few more if this is what you're going to do. So what I did, I just cut a really oversized portion. And let me see, I didn't really even measure it. I just kind of cut it out. This is measuring about 15 by it's about 15 by 14. It really doesn't have to be too exact. It just has to make sure that it overlaps the actual squares that you're making. And the squares that we'll be making are going to be 4 6-inch squares. So you're just going to need 12 by 12 and you'll be totally fine. So if you have a piece of batting 12 by 12, you'll maybe want to do 13 by 13 just to have a little bit extra on the sides. So we're going to go ahead and go with this. So let me just move these over. And I am going to grab a couple things here. It's just an extra one I have here. There we go. And I want you to go ahead and grab your squares. We're also going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my little mini iron, and I'm also going to grab my little mini board because I'll be using that as well. So I'll go ahead and put that there, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of set my iron to start heating up. That way we can move a little bit quicker. So I hope everyone's ready for the weekend and, you know, getting all their goodies all nice and done. So it's going to be a lot of fun this weekend. I think people really enjoy it. Even if you're not into football at all, it's just a lot of fun to have people together. And, you know, you can watch the halftime shows. Those are always fun too. So I think it's just a lot of fun. Now, I'm also using my ruler. I'm using this Omni ruler. So I'm going to go ahead and put my ruler down. And I just have an extra scrappy piece of fabric. And I just want to show you how I cut it, because I know a lot of people struggle with cutting. And I'm just using this Omni ruler that just happens to be 6 inches wide. And it's about 12 inches long. And this ruler, it's, you know, it's probably one of my most used rulers because the size itself, it's really perfect for a lot of the blocks and other things that I'm making. It makes it really easy for me to move around versus some of the larger rulers that I have and the smaller ones that really just don't cut it for what I need it to be. But this is the ruler I have, and I'll show you how I can really get, and this is already hot as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just press a piece of fabric that I have here. This is kind of how I like to do things. I'm going to go ahead and grab, here it is, my little rotary cutter. And I am left-handed, so I like to line up what I'm going to be cutting and have that underneath the ruler. Because if you have the fabric underneath the ruler, there's less of a chance for it moving around. So if you are right-handed, obviously you'd line it up the other way, and you'd be on this side, and then you would go ahead and cut this. And your block the measurement that you're looking to get of your block is going to be underneath the ruler, so it makes it easier and for you to be able to see that you have your actual size that you need, and it allows you to kind of hold the ruler down with your hand so that you can make the cut. So let's go ahead and line this up. So I'm left-handed, so I'm going to line it up the other way. Now, obviously, if you have a piece of fabric that you're just taking off the bulk, you'll have to kind of trim off the selvage. So make sure that you do that. This is just an existing scrap that I have thrown in there, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one. And so I will hold with the opposite hand that I'm cutting with. I'm going to take my hand and hold it down firmly. And when I'm holding down the ruler, I am not doing it one way or the other. I am literally just pressing down. You don't want to have too much force one side or the other, because you'll have the tendency to move the ruler as you're cutting. So make sure that you are holding it down. Now, preferably I like to be standing up when I do my cuts, but in this situation I'll have to kind of just stay here. And then let me go ahead and expose my blade. And I'm going to go ahead and make the cut. Now notice as I'm making the cut, I am pressing down. Now, there is a bad way for you to be able to cut. So let's move this over so you can see this is just fine. I'm going to use the scrap fabric just to kind of show you some no-nos that I've seen done. So some people will hold down the ruler just fine, but they'll still make the cuts incorrectly. And it's because they are not holding the rotary cutter the right way. You want to make sure that you are not using the rotary cutter like this, meaning that your hand is all the way up here, the blade is all the way on this side, and you're at this angle. This is not going to give you a good cut. You also want to make sure that you are not this way. You want to make sure that you're in the right angle. If you're holding it this way, look what you're doing to your wrist. There's a lot of people who then have issues with their wrist because they tend to hurt a lot. And it's because they're not holding the rotary cutter correctly. So you want to make sure that you are at a nice little 45-degree angle when you are cutting. So make sure that you're in a nice position. Like I said, I like to be standing up, so it's a little bit more comfortable for me, but you know, whatever's comfortable for you. Just make sure that you're holding the rotary cutter at a nice 45-degree angle, and the pressure that you're putting on the blade is down, not to the side. You're not cutting sideways like this. You're not cutting this way. You're nice and straight with a nice 45-degree angle and pushing down. That will get you a nice clean cut. So that's just one little tip that I wanted to share with you guys, because I see a lot of people struggle, and it's really on the cutting. It's because they're just not cutting it or holding the rotary blade correctly, or they are not holding the ruler correctly, you know, and so that tends to give you an incorrect cut. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to cut 4 pieces of fabric. Now I'm cutting 2 pieces of fabric. Oh, this is an extra. 2 pieces of fabric on dark, and then 2 pieces of fabric that are light. So I chose these 2 red ones and these 2 pink ones. So I think that would be really nice. And if you remember, we did a little hack not too long ago where we showed how you can make the perfect square and line up the seams absolutely perfectly using this method. And I'm going to kind of use that method. If you kind of recall, when we did that, we ended up with a square that looked like this, which had perfect seams and hitting every single point. And then we also did another one that looked like this. So again, every seam is hitting every point exactly where we wanted it. So in order to do that for this Disappearing 9 project, we're going to use the same method. And it was kind of a quilt as you go method, if you recall. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of that. And let's just get that going. So I'm going to go ahead and grab, this was a piece of scrap batting that I have. And what I'm going to do, kind of put this over to the side, I'm going to bring my little ironing board over. And I'm going to lay my batting on top. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of position it where I want them to be. So I'm going to take my 4 little blocks that I just cut out, 6 inches squared, and I'm going to lay them out. Okay. Now, if you recall, the way we did this was we used a spray base. So you can spray baste, and I believe I have the basting spray here that we used. You can use any one of your choice. This is a basting adhesive, really, really inexpensive. You can find it, but some people do not like to use the spray based. I have pros and cons on both, but what you can also use, they have these Quilter Select free fuse, and this is just a fusible powder. So it's very similar to the spray basting adhesive, but it's just not a spray. This is actually a powder. So for those of you who really don't like the sprays to go all over the place, and maybe, you know, you don't like to have inhaling those fumes and things like that, this is a great alternative. And so we're going to go ahead and try to use this method just so I can show you guys. But if you do have the spray basting adhesive, that's totally fine. It would work as well. So once you've laid it out and you made sure that your blocks are exactly where you want, and you have your points hitting exactly the way you want it, we're going to go ahead and take the powder, or you can take the spray. All right, and I'm going to just kind of lift it up, and I'm going to sprinkle it on here. Now it's powder, so it's a little difficult to see, so I'm going to put it on this side so you guys can actually see it. Okay, and you can see they're just little tiny dots, and that is the little glue dots that are going to adhere the fabric to the batting. So I'm going to go ahead and flip that over. Now grab the other side. I'm going to put some more, and I'm going to do that on all of them. So let's go ahead and sprinkle that. And don't worry if you don't get every single piece. It's totally fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, this really is just a temporary hold for you. Now, if you're using the powder is semi-permanent. So Judy's asking, does the powder wash out? You can put this in the wash. It'll be the same as if you did the spray basting one. But remember, these are semi-permanent, and this is just a temporary basting spray. So by the time you go to put this in the wash, you would have already sewn it together. So the stitches is really what's holding it together, not so much the spray based or the powder. The only thing that's holding it right now is we need it for it to hold it just so that we can get through this step. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So I went ahead and sprinkled the powder on all of these here. Now just make sure that, since I kind of moved them around a little bit, so I want to make sure that they're right on the point. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my iron. And with the heat of my iron, I am going to baste this together with the cotton batting. So let's grab the iron here. Now I'm just using my mini iron because it's just easier to do here in my little corner. But what's really important is when you go to baste this together, you are not going to iron like this. You are basically going to pick up your iron and put it down right where you want it to adhere. And then you're picking up your iron and plotting it in another area. Right? You don't want to move your iron across just yet, because first you want to make sure that you adhere the little fusible powder with the fabric and the batting. And as you can see here, I mean, it's just a nice little alternative to have, to not have to use the spray, because sometimes the spray just gets all over the place, and then it'll, sometimes get on your mat. So if you don't cover it up before you're doing that. So some people actually prefer this method because they don't want to deal with all of that spray going all over the place. Okay, so as you can see here, now if I have areas where I did not put the powder, obviously it's not going to stick, which is totally fine, because really all I am interested is in this area here for it to be completely, kind of sealed together. I don't really care about the edges so much, but you can see wherever I did spray it or put the powder on, you can see it's not going to come off. So it is adhesed to the batting. And you can see here I'm trying to flick up the fabric. It's not coming up. Now my edges are going to come up because I didn't really put too much on the edges. You can see here a little bit of the powder. It's not so much, but I didn't even iron on that end. So you could kind of do the whole thing if you'd like. You can come back and do it. Whoops. And, sorry, I had a little batting on my hand there. So you can come back and iron it totally, or you can just leave it. It really doesn't matter for this part. So go ahead and flip it if you wanted to, and you can iron it this way as well. It's totally up to you. You don't have to have it perfect. We're really just looking for this to just kind of hold it together while I sew it. So now that I have this together, what I want to do is we're going to fold this in half right on the seam. So go ahead and fold this over. Make sure that you are on the seam. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this over to our sewing machine. And you guessed it, we're going to be sewing all the way down. Now, the seam allowance that you decide to use really will depend on how you want your seams to look like, right? So if you want to be able to iron your seams open, then what you can do is you can go ahead and do about a ½ inch of seam allowance, and then that will give you a ¼ inch seam to be able to open. If you barely want a seam, you can do a ¼ inch seam, and then that'll give you about 1/8 of an inch. So in the block that we did here before, that's what we did. We did a ¼ inch, and then we had about 1/8 of an inch seam. You can see it's barely a seam in there. It's very, really small. But I did go ahead and iron that so that the seams laid flat and it was open. If you're going to do a ½ inch seam allowance, you're going to have a bigger seam. So you can see here, I did a ½ inch seam allowance, and then when I ironed it opened, we have a ¼ inch seam here. So it really depends how you want. If you really don't really care, it can work either way. Either way, your block's going to come out amazing. So I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, so now let's get here. I'm going to kind of move my little block here a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and fold this on the seam. You can kind of see it as you're folding. And then I'm going to bring this over to my sewing machine. There we go. You can kind of feel it with your fingers too. Now let's bring this over to my sewing machine, and I have my little sewing machine right here. And I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and extend my stitch length to about 3 inches. It doesn't really need to be too tight. You can do 2.5 or you can do 3 inches, whatever kind of is your preference. And then go ahead and let's just sew that up. Just here. Now, some people have a magnetic seam guide. If that helps, go ahead and use that. I kind of just use the edge of my sewing foot to kind of get that seam down. And then once I have it, you can see here, we've got a nice straight seam coming all the way down here. Now, what we're going to need to do, now that we've sewed our 1/2 inch seam allowance, is I'm going to go ahead and bring this to my pressing board. I like to kind of just set my seams. This is just a step that I like to do. Totally don't have to do this part, but I just like to do it. It's kind of a little, I guess, ritual that I have that I always do when I do my little quilting. So once I have that down, I'm going to go ahead and grab my ruler. And since we did a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I am going to align my ruler to be on the seam line. I'm going to have my 1/4 inch marking right on the seam line, and then the edge of my ruler is going to allow me to kind of cut my seam in half. So if I use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm basically cutting off a 1/4 inch of it. So go ahead and line up your ruler along the seam. Make sure it's nice and straight. Grab your rotary cutter, and we're going to go ahead and cut that piece off. Now just walk your fingers towards the end. If you need to move your ruler, go ahead and do that. Now this is a lot of bulk that you're going through. So I'm going to go ahead, make sure I grabbed everything. Okay. Looks like my blade needs to be changed. Got a little bit of dullness on that one spot. Okay. So once you've done that, you open it up here. And when you open the back, you can just use your fingers to go ahead and open up the seam allowance. And this is kind of doing the quilt as you go method. So we're already incorporated the batting to it. So we kind of save ourselves a step here by doing this. So I just like to use my fingers to go ahead and open it. Then I'm going to grab my little portable ironing board here, and I'm going to grab the iron, and I'm going to go ahead and iron the seam open. Now, some people like to have the seams going to the side, and that's totally fine too. It's really your preference. Now, I also like to use my clapper. So for those of you who have a clapper, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and use that. Once you press that seam open, go ahead and lay the clapper on it. If you don't have one, this is called a tailor's clapper. And this is great to really help keep the seams pressed down. So it's a great way for you to be able to make sure that those seams stay nice and flat. I love using my tailor's clapper. It just really helps a lot on some of these projects. So once you do that, then I just kind of put my tailor's clapper there. And you can see that the seams are nice and pressed open. So now we're going to flip this over. And I could give it a quick press as well from the top if you'd like. You don't really have to. And now what we're going to do, since we've already sewed this way, I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to fold it now on this end here. So let's go ahead and do that. So go ahead and fold it once more. And you can feel the crease right here. Now we're going to go ahead and take it to our sewing machine and we're going to again do another 1/2 inch seam allowance going all the way down. So let's go do that. Okay. Now, as you approach the middle where you have the seams open, you're going to want to just go a little bit slow because it's a lot of bulk that it's going through. Just make sure that those seams stay nice and open, and then you can go ahead and finish the rest of the block. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing. Just going to press this really quick, set that seam. And then I'm going to move this over to the side and grab my ruler. And then again, we have a 1/4 inch seam, so we're going to want to measure a 1/4 inch right on the seam line because we did a 1/2 inch. So we're going to kind of cut off a 1/4 inch of that. So let me line it up from the bottom first. Make sure I'm nice and straight on there. Go ahead and press that. When you get to that middle, just go a little slow. It's a lot of bulk that you're going through. And then I will just cut off the rest. Okay. And so once you do that, when you open it up, you'll see that you have a perfect little block that's hitting all of the points. This works just a lot of the time. It really, really does. It just helps with people who have a really hard time with quilting, hitting those points. This is just really a saver right here. So I'm going to go ahead and finger press this open. So I'm finger pressing my seam. I'm going to grab my little ironing board and I'm going to press those seams open. And then you're also going to want to grab your tailor's clapper if you have one. Just go ahead and lay it flat on there. And then we'll flip this over and do the other side. Go ahead and press that down and you'll see the middle. It's very, very bulky. So just take your time with it. And grab that tailor's clapper. You want to hit a little piece right here that I missed. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. So now you can kind of flip it over to the other side. And we're going to want to just kind of hit it one more time with the iron. Right on that seam line. And then you're going to want to kind of square off your block. So once again, I'm going to grab my ruler and we're just squaring it off. So we're getting rid of all this excess batting that we have here. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, if you notice, I started off cutting my square at 6 inches, and we used a 1/4 inch seam allowance that we have underneath. Well, actually, we used a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we cut off a 1/4 inch, right? So you can see right now, if I kind of line up my ruler, you can see that my block is measuring now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 inches, which is perfect. So what we want to do is make sure that my line is on that 5.5 inch line. And I want to make sure that I am nice and straight. And then let's go ahead and cut that excess batting off. And then you want to turn it and just kind of do the same thing again. Making sure you're nice and square. And just rotate it again. Oh. And again. There's very little waste on this project, which is nice too. There we go. Get rid of that scrap. Did I misjudged one of them? Whoops. Let's just grab this here. Okay. Definitely need to change this blade. Okay, so now we have our nice little square. This is going to kind of be like a little square that we did a couple of lives back. But the difference is going to be that we're going to make this a disappearing 8 square. So, I'm sorry, disappearing 9 square. So what we're going to do is line up now, take your ruler and line it up with that middle crease here. And we're going to measure about 1.5 inches from that center seam. So go ahead and measure a 1.5 inch from your center seam here. Grab your rotary cutter and we're going to go ahead and cut that. So let's do that here. So we've got 1.5 right from my center seam. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Then you're going to just rotate this. Make sure that you're nice and lined up. And again, take that. And we're going to line it up again. 1.5 inches. From that center seam. Got that batting. Okay. Then you're going to rotate it yet again. Try to keep the pieces lined up together. If you have one of those rotary cutters that kind of spiral around, this would be a great opportunity to use that so you don't have to keep lining it up again. And once again, find that center seam again, and you're going to line it up 1.5 inches from that center seam and go ahead and make that cut. Okay. And we've got to rotate it one more time. So we're rotating it a total of 4 times. And just make sure everything is nice and lined up. Especially from that center seam where you're cutting from. Place your ruler down. And if they move on you, just kind of adjust it once it's underneath the ruler. It makes it a little bit easier. Hold that down. Especially when you get to those seams, you get a little difficult sometimes. And you cut. So now, once I've taken these apart, this is what your block's going to look like. And it kind of looks like a hot mess right now. So all you're going to do now is take this center block and we're going to rotate it. And then you're going to take these and rotate them. And then you kind of just put them back together and you'll see how the entire design has really reshaped itself here. So you've got this really cute little design. You could leave it this way, or you can go ahead and rotate this again and make it like this. So there's just so many different ways that you can do this. I mean, if you want to go ahead, let me see if I can line this up this way. You can make it this way. You can make it this way. Here. It really depends the look that you're going for. But it's just you taking those edges that you just cut off and just rotating, just flipping them around. And so now all you have left to do is to kind of sew this back together, and then you would have made your block. So that's pretty easy to do. And now, since you already quilted it, you kind of, I'm sorry, not quilted it, you already had the batting attached to it. It makes it a little bit easier, at least I think, to put it back together. So you're going to go ahead and just line this up and bring it to your sewing machine, and then go ahead and cut and sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance, or you can do the 1/2 inch seam allowance. It's really your preference. I like to kind of stay, if I've already done the 1/2 inch, I can stay with the 1/2 inch all the way. So you can do that. And then once you've sewn these 2 pieces together, I'll sew these 2 together so that I have one full column. You'll do the same thing here, but when you're doing this middle column, you want to make sure that you line up your seams. That's probably the trickiest part. But because you've already have the batting on it and you've pressed your seams open, when you line them up, it makes it a little bit easier for you to see where your seams are and how you need to sew this together. So you can see here, the 2 seams are going to be right on top of each other. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to see where you have to sew. So it makes it nice and easy and flushed like this, so that you can put this together. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these 2 pieces together because I think this is the part where people have the hardest time. So let's do that. And you can go nice and slow when you get to that middle seam. And you can see that you totally hit your point. See how they're nice and lined up, exactly hitting each other? So you would go ahead and press that seam open as well. I'm going to try to speed this up since we're kind of running out of time. I'm going to go ahead and line up the other two pieces. And once again, I'm putting the seam allowances on top of each other because it has the batting. It's like the offset of the colors between the batting and the fabric makes it a lot easier for you to be able to line it up and see that point. So I think this really helps when people are struggling to make sure that they, you know, sew correctly and hit those points. So let's go ahead and sew this together now. Just making sure that your seam stays nice and flat when you bring it over to your sewing machine. Okay. And you can see here how the seams are nice and well put together. You can see how they're hitting all of the points. You have them exactly where you want them. So you definitely need to go ahead and iron those seams open in the back so that it lays nice and flat. But you're pretty good. Now you can just go ahead and continue to do the other pieces. So we still have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and try to do that quickly. So I will line up my block here and bring that over to my sewing machine. And then I will go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So just line that up. Now you have it all nicely hitting all of the points. I'm going to go ahead and do the other column. And let's do the last one here. Now, what you're going to want to do is, whoops, actually I believe was this way. Yeah. Nope, I had it right the first time. There we go. No. Okay. It kind of helps when you have that on the side there so you can see. So now all you're going to have to do is sew the 3 columns together, and when you sew them together, once again you're gonna lay one on top of the other. Now, I prefer to have these already ironed open, so let me just grab my little mini iron again. Let's see if I can quickly just press these seams open. Tried to make them really large seams so you could see them. the camera. Sometimes it's a little difficult to see. Now you can see the middle seam here is a little bit shorter, and that's because we cut a 1/4 inch right off of it as we were doing the quilt as you go method. So now that we're not having to cut it, you'll see that the seam is much larger on this side. It's really not going to matter because no one's going to see that, but it is nice to kind of know that everything kind of calculated correctly. So go ahead and grab my iron for this one. And I'll try to do the other one as well. Between the heat of the iron and the clapper, it really helps to keep the seam nice and open, so that when I bring it to my sewing machine, it just makes it so much easier to do. So now I'm going to go ahead and line these two up. I'm going to put the seams together. Now you can pin it if you'd like, if that helps. Go ahead and pin it together. If not, just go ahead and take it to your machine. And let's just go ahead and do that. Again, once you get to those seams, you're going to want to slow it down a little bit, as you're going through a lot of bulk here. Okay. And of course here you will have the other one to do. So I know that you just repeat the same thing on the last one, and then once you've sewn that up, you'll have your block, and then all you need to do is press it down. Make sure that your seams lay nice and flat. And that's it. You've completed your block. So it's really nice. It's really quick to make. You can make a few of these and then attach them all together to make a little quilt. It's a lot of fun to do, and it's really easy. And using this method, I think, helps for you to be able to hit all of your points. Now, I know that there's some that I have here where, I believe this one is it, where I didn't hit the point exactly. And if you look at it here, it's kind of really difficult to see, which is what's really nice about this project. It's very forgiving. So let's take a look here. I want to kind of show you my mistakes as well. It's really hard to see, but there is maybe about 1/8 of an inch where it is off. So you could see here, it's 1/8 of an inch off, and it still looks great. So totally forgiving project. If you really can't hit the points, try this method, see if it works out for you. Even if you do these little mistakes, because of the way this block's designed, and it doesn't matter how you decide to turn each of these things, it really doesn't matter, because any design that you do is really still going to look great. So that's it for me. This is the block that I've completed. I can do a couple more and then just put them all together and make a cute little quilt. And I think it's a nice little project that you can make just to give as a gift. Or if you have an Etsy shop or a little craft fair coming up and you want to try to sell these are just some quick and easy scrap busters that you can do to make. So that's about all I have. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you really enjoyed making this block. And if you do make them, go ahead and post them in our Facebook page, because I really love to see what you guys come up with. Thank you guys all for tuning in so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope to be crafting with you soon. Bye.